There are places on this planet you are not allowed to go, not discouraged, not warned away, forbidden. Some are guarded by governments that don't explain themselves, and one of them has killed every outsider who has ever tried to reach it for 50,000 years, without a single exception. We start where the consequences are merely legal. We end somewhere the consequences are permanent. Niihau Island, Hawaii. From above, it looks like paradise. White sand beaches, clear water, a small Hawaiian island sitting just 17 miles off the coast of Kauai. You can see it on a map. You can see it from the shore of the neighboring island on a clear day. You cannot go there. Niihau is privately owned. It has been since 1864, when Elizabeth Sinclair purchased it from the Kingdom of Hawaii for $10,000 in gold. Her descendants, the Robinson family, have owned it ever since. And for over 150 years, they have enforced one rule above all others: outsiders are not welcome. The island's population is around 170 people, almost all of native Hawaiian descent. They speak Hawaiian as their first language, one of the last communities on Earth where that is still true. There are no paved roads, no hotels, no internet, no shops. The outside world does not come in, and the residents largely do not go out. The Robinson family has justified the closure as a way to preserve Hawaiian culture and protect a way of life that has vanished almost everywhere else. And there is truth in that. Niihau is the last place on Earth where pre-contact Hawaiian culture survives in anything close to its original form. But the result is a place you can see and cannot touch. An island 17 miles from a tourist resort, as unreachable as if it were in the middle of the Pacific. The family does not need armed guards or government backing. They simply own it. And ownership, it turns out, is one of the most effective barriers ever invented. Lascaux Cave, France. In 1940, 4 teenagers in the Dordogne region of southern France followed their dog into a hole in the ground and found something that changed our understanding of human history. Deep inside a cave system, covering the walls and ceilings of chambers that had been sealed for thousands of years, were paintings, hundreds of them. Animals, humans, symbols, rendered in black and red and yellow with a precision and artistry that no one believed was possible 17,000 years ago. Lascaux became one of the most significant archaeological discoveries ever made, and within 20 years of its discovery, it was closed forever. Here is the problem. When the cave was opened to the public in 1948, visitors began arriving at a rate of over 1,000 per day. Each person brought heat, moisture, and carbon dioxide. Each breath altered the atmosphere that had preserved the paintings for 17 millennia. Within 15 years, green algae had begun spreading across the walls. White calcite deposits were forming over the images. The damage that took 15,000 years of sealed isolation to prevent was being undone in a decade and a half of human interest. The French government closed the cave to the public in 1963. Access today is restricted to a small number of vetted researchers, and even they follow strict protocols designed to minimize atmospheric disruption. A full replica, Lascaux 4, has been built nearby for visitors. The originals are off-limits permanently. What makes Lascaux quietly extraordinary is the reasoning behind the restriction. The cave isn't forbidden because it's dangerous. It's forbidden because you would damage it. Your presence alone, your breath, your body heat, your existence in that space is the threat. 17,000 years of survival, undone by curiosity. Gruinar Island, Scotland. Off the northwest coast of Scotland, there is a small island, roughly a mile long and half a mile wide. From the mainland, it is close enough to see clearly. For over 40 years, it was close enough to see and impossible to safely approach. During the Second World War, the British government needed to test a weapon. Specifically, they needed to know whether anthrax could be delivered as a biological agent from the air. Gruinard Island was selected as the test site. It was remote, it was uninhabited, and it was expendable. In 1942, sheep were placed on the island. Bombs containing anthrax spores were detonated. The sheep died. Scientists took their samples and left. What they left behind was an island so thoroughly contaminated that it remained officially off limits for the next 48 years. Anthrax spores do not degrade quickly. They can survive in soil for decades. The island was quarantined. Warning signs were posted on the shoreline. The British government quietly bought the island from its original owners and said as little as possible about what had been done to it. In 1986, a group calling itself Dark Harvest Commandos collected soil samples from Gruinard and mailed them to government research facilities and the Conservative Party headquarters, demanding decontamination. The government responded. A major operation using formaldehyde solution and seawater was conducted across the island's soil. In 1990, a government scientist walked across the island and declared it safe. Whether it is fully safe is a question some researchers still debate. The island is technically accessible today, but it remains uninhabited. No one has chosen to live there, and the knowledge of what was done to it and what still might be present in its soil makes it one of the most quietly sinister places on this list. Surtsey Island, Iceland. In November 1963, fishermen off the southern coast of Iceland reported something they couldn't explain. The sea was boiling. A column of smoke and ash was rising from the water. And over the following days, something began to appear above the surface of the ocean. A new island was being born. The volcanic eruption lasted until 1967, building Surtsey up from the seafloor to a landmass of nearly 3 square kilometers. Scientists watched it appear in real time, and almost immediately they made a decision that is almost unique in modern history. They chose not to touch it. Surtsey was designated a nature reserve, and access was restricted to a small number of approved researchers. The reasoning was scientific, but it had a philosophical edge to it. Here was a piece of land that had never existed before, never been touched by human hands, never been contaminated by seeds or microbes, or anything carried in from the outside world. It was a controlled experiment in how life colonizes bare rock. And for that experiment to mean anything, humans had to stay out of it. The results have been extraordinary. Within months of the eruption stopping, bacteria appeared, then mosses, then seabirds began nesting, soil began forming beneath the nests, more plants followed. An entire ecosystem has been building itself from nothing in real time, watched by scientists who are not allowed to interfere. Surtsey is not forbidden because it is dangerous. It is forbidden because it is too valuable to risk. Every unauthorized visitor who set foot on it would bring seeds, insects, and microbes that would contaminate 50 years of pristine data. An island that appeared from the ocean less than 60 years ago, already building its own world, and doing it entirely without us. Runit Dome, Marshall Islands. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, on a small island in the Marshall Islands atoll, there is a dome. It is roughly 115 meters in diameter, made of 18-inch thick concrete, sitting on a crater blasted into the island by a nuclear weapon. Inside it is the radioactive waste of over 40 nuclear tests, conducted by the United States between 1946 and 1958. The dome was built between 1977 and 1980 as a temporary solution. Contaminated soil, debris, and material from the testing program was collected and placed inside the crater. The concrete cap was poured over the top, and the United States government, by most accounts, moved on. The problem is that the dome was never designed to be permanent. It was never lined on the bottom, meaning it sits directly on the crater floor, open to the groundwater and the ocean below it. As sea levels rise and the Pacific pushes further inland, the dome is increasingly exposed to flooding. Cracks have appeared in the concrete. Radioactive material is already leaching into the surrounding lagoon. The Marshall Islands government has called it a ticking time bomb. American officials have pointed out that because the dome sits on Marshallese land, the legal responsibility for maintaining it belongs to the Marshall Islands. A nation of roughly 40,000 people with no nuclear program and no resources to manage a Cold War radioactive legacy. The local name for the dome is Lomnac Jr. It means the thing that burns. Access is restricted. The surrounding area is contaminated. And somewhere beneath 18 inches of aging concrete, in a dome that was only ever meant to be temporary, the waste of the 20th century's most destructive experiments sits in contact with the rising Pacific Ocean. Mezhgorye, Russia. In the southern Ural Mountains of Russia, there is a closed city, not classified, not simply restricted, closed. It does not appear on most maps. Outsiders are not permitted to enter without authorization that is almost never granted. And 2 battalions of Russian military personnel are stationed there permanently. The city is called Mezhgorye. Its official population is around 17,000 people. What those people do there is not publicly confirmed. What is known comes from a combination of declassified intelligence reports, satellite imagery analysis, and a 1992 claim made on the floor of the Russian parliament by a politician named Vladimir Zhirinovsky, who stated that the Yamantau mountain complex, inside which Mezhgorye sits, contains a nuclear bunker large enough to house the entire Soviet leadership in the event of a Third World War. The Russian government has offered several explanations over the years: a repository for Russian treasures, a food storage facility, a mining complex. Each explanation has been given and then quietly retired without elaboration. What satellite imagery has confirmed is significant construction activity within the mountain complex spanning decades. Tunnels, underground facilities, infrastructure on a scale that does not match any of the official explanations. Mezhgorye is forbidden not with warning signs or international exclusion zones. It is forbidden with the weight of a state that does not explain itself. If you drove toward it, you would be stopped. If you were found in the surrounding area without authorization, you would be detained. What happens inside the mountain behind the city is one of the most persistent, unanswered questions of the post-Cold War era. The city exists. The mountain exists. What's inside it, the Russian government has decided, is not your concern. Javari Valley, Brazil. Deep in the western Amazon, there is a territory the size of Austria. It has rivers threading through it, dense rainforest canopy covering almost all of it, and communities living inside it who have made a decision that is very difficult for the outside world to accept. They do not want contact, and the Brazilian government, legally, is obliged to respect that. The Javari Valley Indigenous Territory is believed to contain the highest concentration of uncontacted peoples anywhere on Earth. At least 14 confirmed isolated groups, and possibly more that have never been documented. These are communities that have chosen, or whose ancestors chose, to live without any relationship with the outside world. FUNAI, Brazil's Indigenous Affairs Agency, operates base camps at the territory's boundaries specifically to prevent incursion. The reason the restriction exists is not bureaucratic, it is historical. Every time isolated indigenous communities have come into contact with the outside world, the results have been catastrophic. Disease moves through populations with no acquired immunity like a fire through dry forest. Communities that survived for centuries in isolation have been destroyed within a generation of first contact. The Spanish brought it, the Portuguese brought it, missionaries brought it, researchers brought it. The pattern repeats. So the border exists, and it is not symbolic. FUNAI agents have turned back illegal loggers, miners, and missionaries. Some have been killed doing it. In 2018, the same year a missionary named John Allen Chow died on North Sentinel Island. Another group of illegal intruders entered Javari territory and murdered FUNAI agent Maxiel Pereira dos Santos. The Javari Valley is not forbidden because the people inside it are dangerous. It is forbidden because the people inside it are vulnerable, and because the history of what happens when that boundary is crossed has been written in full enough times already. Mount Kailash, Tibet. There are mountains on this list that are inaccessible because of terrain or politics or physics. This one is inaccessible because 4 of the world's major religions have agreed, across centuries and without a formal meeting, that it should not be climbed. Mount Kailash rises to 6,638 meters in a remote corner of western Tibet. It is one of the most striking peaks in the Himalayas, a near-perfect pyramid of dark rock and ice, rising above a plateau that sits at over 4,000 meters of altitude. It is visible from vast distances. It has been known to the people of the region for thousands of years. No one has ever stood on its summit. In Hinduism, Kailash is the home of Shiva. In Tibetan Buddhism, it is the abode of Demchok, a representation of supreme bliss. In Jainism, it is the site where the first Tirthankara achieved liberation. In the ancient Bon religion of Tibet, it is the soul of the entire world. To climb it, in every one of these traditions, is not a feat of athleticism, it is desecration. The Chinese government, which controls access to the Tibetan side, has banned climbing permits for Kailash specifically. In 2001, a Spanish expedition received what they believed was permission to attempt the summit. When the request became public, it triggered immediate protests from Buddhist and Hindu organizations across Asia. The permit was withdrawn before the attempt began. Reinhold Messner, widely considered the greatest mountaineer of the 20th century, was offered the chance to climb Kailash. He declined. He said later that some mountains are not meant to be climbed. A 6,638-meter peak, technically within the range of modern mountaineering, and yet it stands untouched, not because it is impossible, but because the consensus of billions of people across 4 religions and several thousand years carries more weight than any individual summit ambition. The mountain is not protected by law, it is protected by meaning. Diego Garcia, British Indian Ocean Territory. In the middle of the Indian Ocean, roughly halfway between Africa and Indonesia, there is an atoll. It is shaped like a footprint. It has white sand beaches, clear lagoons, and the kind of geography that travel magazines are built around. It is also one of the most fortified military installations on the planet, and the story of how it got that way is one of the most uncomfortable chapters in recent British and American history. Diego Garcia was inhabited, not historically, not anciently. It was inhabited until 1973. The Chagosian people had lived on the island for generations. They had homes, churches, cemeteries, a community. Between 1968 and 1973, the British government, in coordination with the United States, systematically removed the entire population. Residents were told they were being temporarily relocated for work. They were put on ships with their belongings and taken to Mauritius and the Seychelles, thousands of miles away. They were not brought back. The island was handed to the United States military. What was built there is now one of the most strategically significant bases in the world. A deep water port, runways long enough for any aircraft in operation, and a location that places American military assets within range of the Middle East, South Asia, and East Africa simultaneously. The Chagosians have been fighting in British courts for the right to return since the 1970s. They have won rulings. The rulings have been appealed, overturned, or ignored. In 2024, a deal was announced to return sovereignty of the islands to Mauritius, but the military base and its restrictions remain. No civilian may visit Diego Garcia. There is no commercial access, no tourism, no way in without military clearance that is not granted to the public. The island is off-limits by order of 2 governments who decided, in 1971, that the people who lived there were less important than the location they lived on. North Sentinel Island, India, and now the place I told you about at the beginning. In the Bay of Bengal, roughly 50 kilometers from the Andaman Islands, there is a small forested island roughly the size of Manhattan. From the air, it looks calm. Dense tree cover, a beach on its northern shore, clear water surrounding it. The people who live there have been there for at least 50,000 years. They are called the Sentinelese, and in all of that time, 50,000 years of human history, of empires rising and falling, of the entire development of modern civilization, they have had no contact with the outside world. none that they chose, none that they survived without violence. We do not know their language. We do not know how many of them there are. We do not know their beliefs, their social structure, their history beyond what we can infer from a distance. Every serious attempt to make contact has ended the same way, with arrows fired from the beach, with spears, with a message so clear it has never required translation. In 2006, 2 fishermen whose boat drifted near the island while they slept were killed. Their bodies were visible from a Coast Guard helicopter, but the Sentinelese fired arrows at the aircraft, making recovery impossible. In 2018, an American missionary named John Allen Chow paid local fishermen to take him to the island illegally. He believed he had a calling to bring Christianity to the Sentinelese. He tried to approach the island multiple times over several days. On his final attempt, the tribe killed him. His body was never recovered. India has drawn an exclusion zone around the island. Entering the surrounding waters is illegal. The Indian government has concluded, after decades of intermittent contact attempts, that the Sentinelese right to isolation outweighs any argument for engagement. And here is the part that should stop you. The Sentinelese are not protected from us because they are dangerous. They are protected from us because we are dangerous. A population that has had no exposure to the outside world for 50,000 years has no immunity to diseases that most of us carry without symptoms. The common flu could move through the island like a plague. Measles could kill them. A single contact event, one person stepping ashore with a cold, could end a community that has survived every other thing the world has thrown at it. The arrows are not the reason you cannot go there. You cannot go there because your presence alone, regardless of your intentions, could destroy something that has existed since before recorded history, since before writing, since before agriculture, since before almost every other feature of the world as we know it. The most forbidden place on earth is not forbidden because of a government, not because of a military installation, not because of radiation or religion or the ambitions of a powerful family. It is forbidden because the people who live there have been keeping the world out for 50,000 years. And unlike almost every other barrier on this list, this one has never failed. From a private island closed by a single family's decision, to a concrete dome leaking nuclear waste into the Pacific, to an island that has defended itself since before civilization existed, these places share one thing. The world has not reached them yet, and in most cases, the world has decided it shouldn't try. What's striking about this list is how many different forms forbidden takes. Sometimes it's a government with armed guards. Sometimes it's a religious consensus stretching back thousands of years. Sometimes it's the knowledge that your presence alone is the danger. And sometimes it's an arrow from a beach, fired by someone who has never heard of the country you came from and doesn't need to. There are more places like these than most people realize, not hidden, visible on satellite maps, listed in databases, close enough to see from the mainland. Just unreachable, by law, by force, by choice, or by 50,000 years of consistent, unambiguous messaging. The world is not as open as we think it is, and some of the places that are closed have very good reasons for staying that way.